Hello and good morning. My name is Megan Kaminsky, and I will be representing the ethical perspective. Here are my teammates. This is Jenna Beydoun. She will be covering the educational perspective. This is Ryan Husseini. She will be covering the social perspective. And this is Sarah Farhat. She will be covering the scientific perspective. So today we will be discussing the question, to what extent does mobile technology impact adolescent behavior? Now, we drafted up this question, as you can see in the infographic. Over the past several decades, mobile technology has made leaps and bounds. And reading the stimulus articles from Dan Hurley, clinical psychologist, Can You Make Yourself Smarter, and Tansy Raja, expert in technology and journalism, is coding new literacy, we really asked, we wanted to see how much technology, it is prevalent, but how important is it? And we can see with Dan Hurley technology, mobile technology, it improves intelligence and memory, and with Tansy Raja's article, it talked about how people are getting more involved, especially adolescents, the youth of today, how involved they are in getting, how involved they are in the creation of that technology and its operation, and the programming and coding. And from that, we really wanted to see, we wanted to ask, how has that impacted adolescent behavior? And from that, it's important to see, because adolescent behavior with technology today will shape the future of how our society runs. And again, our question and our claim is that mobile technology greatly impacts adolescent behavior socially, ethically, scientifically, and educationally.
We decided that parental supervision is an adequate solution. Parental supervision can keep children safe from suspicious online activity, as well as decrease the risk of internet addiction. This is according to the American Psychological Association. Parental supervision can also force adolescents to interact more with family and friends, therefore developing more emotional connections, and this is according to the University of California. However, according to Kimberly J. Mitchell et al., the University of New Hampshire, parental supervision did not reduce the exposure of teens to inappropriate websites and images. Meanwhile, according to Melissa Pujuzan's Zeke et al. with an MD, parental supervision does reduce risk, and the majority of parents were found to supervise their children, and it did reduce exposure. Educationally, parental supervision would help adolescents perform better academically, and this is according to Elizabeth Turner, an expert in psychology, and Lisa Turner with a PhD in developmental psychology. Scientifically, they have one less of a distraction, therefore they can think more creatively, and this is according to Martin Kutcher with an MD and Natalie Razin with an education and psychology major. Ethically, students would practice more caution online, according to the Department of Education, and from a social perspective, studies conducted have shown that increasing parental monitoring would cause adolescents to release less personal information while online, and this is according to Gustavo Mesh with a professor of sociology with a PhD.
If we do not implement this solution, however, adolescents will become dependent on technology, as stated by the article Emerging Trends. So adolescents, they'll just be dependent on the technologies, and they won't be able to think creatively or think for themselves. So they won't be able to gain those critical thinking skills that are needed in many jobs today. And while we have a valid team solution, however, there are limits to it, as stated by the University of California. Parents don't use technology-based methods, so which means that they don't really monitor what their child's doing online. Rather, they talk about to their child what's wrong and what's right. So their child might go against their wishes and views, inappropriate websites or inappropriate images that they're not supposed to. And as you can see by this graphic, most parents, they do talk to their child and supervise their child online. However, they do not use technology-based methods. So our team solution, while it is a good one, there are some limits to it as well.
An alternative solution to parental supervision would be governmental regulation. According to C. Diane Martin, an associate professor in electrical engineering and computer science, and Joseph M. Riegel, who's an expert in business management technology and policy programs, government policies and industry strategies have a potential to shield the public, especially children, from exposure to inappropriate content. Although this solution seems logical, the team solution is better, since Lara Knott, who's an executive director of the First Amendment Center, mentions that this will be much more difficult to implement due to the First Amendment protecting hate speech and pornography from governmental censorship. As seen in the image, 62% of all adults oppose governmental regulation, which proves that it would be much more difficult for individuals to agree on changing the First Amendment. From an educational perspective, blue light negatively affects adolescent behavior. According to Martin K. Putzer, who is an MD and expert in child neurology, blue light emerging from technology disrupts one's sleep onset, resulting in a sleep deficiency. This then could suppress classroom participation, awareness, and social competence. With excessive internet usage and blue light exposure, this could result in an addiction and therefore lower the GPA, which is the grade point average of children. Critics such as Michael J. Lewis, who has a PhD in clinical psychology, argues that apps are being developed to switch to a warmer wavelength during the evening in order to minimize sleep distractions amongst children. Although this may be true, Giosa Baha, who is a clinical psychologist, mentions that uh, 12 to 19% of melatonin is suppressed during night shift, which is when blue light is being shifted to a warmer wavelength, which proves that this individual solution is not sufficient enough in reducing the effects that blue light imposes onto one's behavior during the night. According to the image, memory and the capability of being able to learn during night shift is according to the image, blue light exposure impairs memory learning capabilities for the following day due to a disrupted sleeping schedule, which proves that being able to limit technology use and blue light exposure during the evening must be ensured.
So from my scientific perspective, I'll be focusing on my lens about mental illness. And for my first point is by Stephen Lockley, who's a Harvard sleep researcher, that says excessive cell phone usage can lead to an increased risk of depression because adolescents will be secluding themselves from others and they'll feel lonely and isolated from society. So they'll have an increased risk of depression because they don't have anyone to talk with or just talk with in general. And Murray B. Stein, an MD, also states that using cell phones and other forms of technology can increase social anxiety because, as I've stated before, they are isolated from one another and they don't gain the social skills that they get from going outside and physically interacting with one another. While these are valid points, however, there are some people such as Nicole B. Ellison, Department of Telecommunications, that states that there are online relationships and friendships which are real friendships, and Chris Beirut, who's a journalist, says that due to technological apps such as Duolingo, people can learn more languages easily. While these are valid points, however, Aaron A. Vogel, who's a psychology researcher, states that due to fake identities and cyberbullying online, this can lead to low self-esteem, so no matter how good the effects may be, there's still negative impacts because of self-worth. And as you can see, the more that people use their phone technology, there's an increased risk of anxiety.
Thank you. Building on from that, mobile technology incites internet addiction in some adolescents, as you can see in the bottom right image. It is compared to drugs and the fact that it can be very addictive. And that addiction kind of opens adolescents up to something like online predators, which a little less than 800,000 registered sex offenders in 2015 alone, a survey says, all capable of accessing the internet, and that's with 95% of 12 to 17-year-olds are online. That is 23.5 million people that are possible victims to predators online. And what's scary about that is the fact that 16% of these adolescents are willing to meet these people and 8% actually follow through. Now, that is very dangerous and very unethical in the fact that it is harmful to these adolescents for that, especially with behaviors that already encourage that. Now, mobile technology does improve intelligence and memory, as Dan Hurley, accredited as a neuroscientist, would suggest. However, mobile technology still opens children up to things like cyberbullying, which can create an increased risk for LGBTQ suicide and that.
According to Gustavo Smash, cyberbullying is increased through mobile technology, and personality traits are impaired because adolescents are able to disguise online as anonymous people, and therefore they are more free to, they feel they are more free to emotionally taunt others, and as a result, these others have low self-esteem. Mobile technology also results in social consequences, and that there's an increased risk of sexual behavior. According to Eric Binach, persons seeking sexual partners online report more total sexual partners, more increased unprotected sex acts, and higher rates of substance use. This is socially unacceptable, so hurts adolescents' reputations. According to Kaveri Subramanian, mobile technology increases interaction with strangers, and these friendships aren't as high quality because they don't last as long and therefore allow less self-disclosure. According to communication, although communication might help relieve social rejection, it's mostly troubled teens that report to chat rooms. And while the internet is an important searching tool and must not oversee the fact that it does emotionally harm adolescents, and it's possible to hurt their reputation, and this is all according to Mesh. And this shows how much cyberbullying is rising and how it's becoming more increased with increased mobile technology.
Okay, the first question goes to Megan. What is a way in which your team's resolution makes you think differently about your own individual research?
Our solution, which was about parental supervision, made me think differently about my research, and the fact that my research, of course, was all, it was about ethics, and parental supervision made me think differently about my research because over parental supervision could also be a bad thing as well. So it influenced my research by me paying attention to over excessive mobile technology and excessive parenting. It made me think of excessive usage.
Second question goes to Jenna. What was the strongest counter argument to the solution or conclusion your team identified, and why?
The strongest counter argument that our team identified was stated by Rohan Nagar, who is an expert and researcher in lighting. Many people believe that night shift, which is the change from blue light to warm wavelength during the evening, would help reduce the effects that blue light imposes on the adolescents using the mobile technology. But in reality, 12 to 19% of the blue light is still being suppressed within the adolescents. So it proves that just switching the wavelength would not be adequate enough in order to reverse these effects, and further implications such as parental supervision would be needed for a full effect.
The next question goes to Ryan. Describe an argument from one of your peers' individual reports that made you think differently about your team's solution or conclusion.
Okay. From Megan's ethical perspective, basically the fact that 15% of high schoolers are being bullied electronically, it might kind of show that maybe it's not as great of a problem as we think it is. It's still a relevant problem, but it's not as great of a problem. So maybe there is being already enough parental supervision being enacted.
And last question goes to Sarah. Having finished your project, what, if anything, do you consider to be a gap in your team's research that, if addressed, would make you feel more confident about your conclusion?
So as you could see by our research question, we said technology as a whole. However, I don't know if you guys have noticed, but when we researched, we mostly just focused on cell phones, even though we said technology as in general. So we should have included more like iPads or Bluetooth and other forms of technology that are still relevant and new to our society today.